Hello and welcome to Spooning with me, Mark Wogan. Of course, we are here as ever in the Mount Street restaurant where Jamie Shears, Executive Chef, has been cooking up a storm for my celebrity guest. Now, today's guest worryingly knows how to get away with murder and has history with his neighbours, but he is an actor extraordinaire. He's tall, he's handsome, he's lovely. And you can go off people, but please welcome Alfred Enoch, who prefers to be Alfie.
Hi, Mark. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, welcome, welcome. Now, we've kicked off with your favourite drink, which
fantastic.
is, tell the listeners at home.
Well, if I'm right, this is going to be a pint of London Pride.
Go on.
Is that it?
Outstanding.
Brewed in Chiswick.
Go on, taste that.
No, it's not. It's
No.
lighter. I
It's
was
light.
thinking by colour it.
No, it's
Oh
but
my
it isn't.
goodness,
It
is it a
an
Buckham?
It's an ale.
It's an ale.
Because downstairs
It's a very
here,
nice one.
obviously, is the Audley Public House,
Right.
Which is, I mean, arguably one of the poshest pubs in London, but it's still a pub. Right? They do serve ales, and they serve Scotch eggs, and they serve sausages, and all that kind of stuff.
good.
But we just thought we'd kick you off with warm you in nicely with a pint. I mean.
Oh, that's really nice.
When I was reading your notes, it's that sort of thing. You didn't. You get an impression of people, which is always wrong because obviously you're an actor and you play different people. But
So you can't trust me.
given the roles that you've played, the last thing I thought, ale drinker. He's a definite ale drinker. No, I can't see you at some sort of ale festival with lots of men with beards going, oh, I like the...
With my camera badge.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm working towards.
Yeah. You obviously, like all our guests, fill in a little questionnaire before you come on, your food loves, your food hates. You took a very alternative approach, which was long voice notes that Johnny, the producer, then had to transcribe for me.
Oh no, I'm really grateful, Johnny. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry.
But it is quite interesting because, your background is, you have a very strong Brazilian theme to because your mother was Brazilian.
Yeah.
And your food loves have a very high Brazilian note, which we will get to. But you sort of start with, the Englishman comes out in you with your first love, which is this.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's very good.
Beans, you love your baked beans.
This looks absolutely delicious.
Well, get stuck in it. It's there for you. You can eat it. I mean, you've got your pint.
Oh.
You've got your full English fry up. I mean, you could be in the Wetherspoons at Gatwick, waiting to take off for a week in Faliraki.
Wow, that's my happy place. Mark. I didn't realise I'd said that on the voice note. Usually I try to keep
No,
that
you
a bit
haven't.
more
I
private.
just drew that assumption.
You
that-
just saw me.
yeah.
It's
Pint of ale and a full English.
I
Please.
fooled you once, but now.
Now, would the Brazilian side of your family look at that in horror and go, well, he's not one of us?
I think they'd be baffled.
And he's look, I love that. Straight
Look at
into
this,
the black pudding. Straight into the black pudding with the beans. Now, you do like your food.
Oh,
You know,
food is one of the best things in my life.
well, as I've said many times, no passion for food, no passion.
That's quite good.
But it's that thing. It's
I
like
think
it's
there's total truth in that.
when we were both single, because you're not anymore, and neither am I. I'm happily married of 21 years now. But when you were dating, for me, it was that thing of when you went out with somebody and they were sort of pushing the food around the table, it's like I don't really or you sit in the restaurant and they go, I'll have the green salad to start, no dressing, and then just a plain chicken. Because you're like, no, I'm good.
Oh dear.
No, thank you. That's not going to work for me.
To be honest, I wouldn't mind that so much, because then there's more for me.
Oh well, I suppose there is.
I'm very selfish in that way.
Well-
So I say, no. Oh, it looks a bit big. Oh, great, get it. Let's do starters as well, and just anything you can.
Look, anything you can't. I mean, my poor wife has, because I'm a very fast eater. I've been accused of eating like I've just got out of prison because I eat very quickly, very few chews. It's not very healthy, and then what happens is
that's not me.
I sit there with Susan just like that, waiting to see what might be.
What's going to come your way?
It's like, and even before she's finished, like, do you want that? Do you want that? Yes, I do. I just haven't got to it yet.
So you haven't worked out a system with that? It hasn't.
Well, I mean, one thing I do know about my wife is never get between her and a potato.
Really?
Yeah, she is the carb queen.
Now, this interests me because this is probably my Brazilian side. Potatoes. I don't quite get them.
What?
Now I love.
You're talking to an Irishman here. I mean, this is, you know.
It's good. This is
like
contentious,
heresy.
isn't it? I thought I'd get the difficult stuff out there early.
Yeah.
Rice in my house. Rice, always rice. My parents made rice brilliantly. They fry it with garlic and a bit of thyme, and honestly, that's something. When they used to have people around, people always say the rice is very good.
I mean, I love good rice. But tell me, who was the cook in the house? Were they both good cooks?
They were both good cooks. They were both good cooks. My mum would probably do most of the cooking, and my dad would kind of swan in with something impressive on the weekend or something and try and take all the credit. But really, my mum,
she was the feeder. And was it very influenced by her heritage, her food?
So no, actually, not for the most part. This is so good, truly. I'm just trying to answer your question
I am going to warn you, we do have more food for you.
Don't worry. Quantity is never going to be a problem for me.
Good. Where we have a commonality in things that we enjoy is your love of exotic baked goods. So I have for you here.
Oh, wow.
Now, you said you love a cronut.
Yes, that was
Now,
a moment of discovery.
it turns out that the world of posh baked goods has moved on.
Oh.
And now you have the dosant. which as far as
I've been under a rock for the last 10
I don't know what
years,
you're
that's what I
doing.
realised.
Move on. You've got to move with the times. You know, the cronut is so 2019. We're now into the dosant.
Wow.
Check that out. It is a vast piece of all butter pastry that has been deep fried and then coated in, quite frankly, a life-ending amount of sugar.
That looks spectacular. My only concern at this point is I'm going to have to hurry up with my frying.
No, you don't have to finish that. We can move on.
Want to.
You want to finish. Look, I think it's time.
I'll put it aside.
Put it to one side.
It shouldn't have been so delicious if it was for me to
I mean,
eat the whole
you know,
thing.
it is a Mayfair fry up after all. I'm just going to move that over there.
I thought it was a Gatwick Wetherspoons fry.
No. It's a bit posher than that.
Okay.
Now, look, tell me,
Look at this.
in the progression of baked goods, have they reached a new nirvana with the dosant? This is what I'm interested in.
Wow.
Because you are an exponent of the cronut, but this
am.
is next gen, as they say.
Oh, look at that.
I can see the fat spilling out onto your fingers.
Fantastic. That feeling, which slightly irks me as well, that's part of the joy as well. Your hands are getting sticky and you think, I've got to wipe them, but before I do...
No. Well, it's like, can you eat a fruit pastel without licking your lips? It's the same thing.
I love a fruit.
How is that?
Oh, that's very good.
It's good, isn't it? It's quite light.
Much lighter than a cronut. Cronut, I remember.
Cronut's got a bit of lamination to it, but that's kind of got all the air and I suppose more room for sort of fat to sit in the centre.
Which is exactly as it should be.
Well, as we say, fat equals flavour. Now,
how's that on the one meal a day?
I mean, literally, I am salivating looking at that, and I may have to break my fast to try that.
That's fantastic.
But
I'm so happy.
Now down here, I've got a relatively relevant beverage that perhaps would go with that, which you as a child may well have been forced to drink, which is butterbeer.
Pretty much. No one forces me to drink anything, Mark. If it's available, I'll have it. You find me at a party, I'll buy the food and the drink.
This obviously, to those who don't know, relates to your time in the Harry Potter movies. And I've got other Harry Potter stuff down here as well that they very kindly sent us. So we've got.
Oh, these are
What are these? So we've got.
Bertie Bott's every flavour beans. Now, the thing with these is sometimes you get things. They say what is it? The thing. There's a line in the book and the film. They say every flavour and they mean every flavour.
Yeah.
And some of them really weren't very nice.
No,
but
they shouldn't be flavours.
Popcorn one, which was amazing, which I still remember. And there's something
I'm
kind of
ripping this
addictive
out now.
about like you want the next flavour and you're like, oh, what about this bit and what about that bit?
I don't think
What's that?
in the movie they came in heat sealed plastic, but you know. let's go on, dip in.
Oh, no, I'm just going to go round. I know what it looks like. I know what the one I want looks like, and I can't see it yet.
But
it's that popcorn one. It's white with
with the
maybe
little
I've got a few with the
speckles.
little speckles, little yellow
that-
speckles.
is that
Might be this because there's a couple that look like it.
right, I'm going to get something similar.
Okay.
This is small enough that I won't be
see.
breaking my fast. No, there's your popcorn one. Look, right down the bottom there.
Is it? Because that wasn't it. That wasn't it.
Was that it?
No. The brown one. I've made that mistake before. Oh. See, it's a game. That's the good thing about these. You can't stop eating them because you go, oh. Quite like that. I'm not
good.
sure what it is.
But I mean,
Very
for
Moorish.
those who don't know the world of Harry Potter, who may have
Goodness, is that
may have
anyone in this day and age?
may have existed under a rock, or perhaps were living off grid for a long time, or just had mean parents. How important do you think that was to your career, being involved in that?
Yeah, I mean, massive. So I'll make that point about I'll clarify that thing I said I would about not being sure I wanted to be part of it. I did want to be part of it because I'd read the books and I absolutely loved them. I was totally smitten. So for me, it was about the biggest thing that could possibly have turned up, and they literally turned up at my school and auditioned everyone in a 2-year age range.
Because you were 11.
I was 11, and I didn't audition because I thought I'm not going to get a part. It's too big. It's this massive thing, and it's wonderful. And the other side of it was I thought there's not going to be a part for me, because I thought as a young black boy, the only character that I knew of in the books that was black explicitly was Lee Jordan, and he was older.
Right.
So I thought, well, they're not going to cast me as Lee Jordan. And I remember I had this thought, unless Dean Thomas, he's sort of not very described, so I suppose maybe I could play that part. But I ended up not doing the audition. And I was doing a play with the National Youth Music Theatre, which then went on tour, and someone from the casting department saw me in the play, and then they asked me to audition.
Wow.
And I ended up playing Dean Thomas in the end. So it was more that kind of thing of trepidation, and foreboding,
uncertainty
and
about your talent and position in it all,
Yeah.
and then it all sort of coming good.
which was a real gift.
But then that was sort of the next 7 years or so of your life.
10 years.
10 years. 10
And
years of your life.
And to your other question, it obviously a fundamental impact on my career, because it was at that point, even though I'd done that play with the National Youth Music Theatre, Harry Potter was my first professional job.
Because it was such a big part of your childhood. So you go in at 11 and you sort of come out at 21. Did you at any point feel like you'd missed out on a bit of your childhood?
Not at all, which is, again, I was so lucky with the whole thing and how it came about, not just the beginning, because I got to be part of this thing which I already knew of, loved. It mattered to me, and I would get the books as a fan and sort of consume them. But because I didn't have so much to do, I had a kind of normal life. So it was more like a kind of summer school or something in a way. I mean, a very strange summer school.
I'm popping off to set for one of the biggest movie franchises in the world. I'll be back next week.
It was kind of that.
Yeah, nice.
It was very useful because, sometimes I had homework due and I knew I was filming, and I would go, I'm not going to be in to hand it in, so that's great. So I'll just not do it. And then I would do it at set and
but you did,
miss the rest
I mean,
of the
despite
work.
occasionally missing the odd bit of homework, you did end up going to Oxford.
I did,
Yeah.
yes.
So you're
No, I
nobody's fool, should I say.
Well-
maybe from an academic point of view, you're nobody's fool.
Yeah,
in other
there are
aspects of
lots
life,
yeah, exactly. There's a lot of
complete
foolery.
idiot. But and what was that like? Because obviously you you become an actor early on, and then you sort of become, because you can't sort of take a half-assed approach to being at Oxford. You've got to be there and study and.
Yes and no.
Oh, you can.
You can take a half-assed approach to anything,
Yes,
Mark.
that's true.
If my life has taught me anything.
I try that with most of my life.
And see,
It's worked out all right.
There's something to be said for it. I mean, the strange thing about Oxford is that you have very short terms. So you have 3 8-week terms. So outside that time, so most of the filming, I think, probably fell outside of that time. And the other thing is, all of a sudden you have a lot of autonomy academically. So it's not that you've got classes every day, or you have to kind of do the work.
But you were also
yourself.
doing theatre as well.
Yes, I was.
It wasn't like, I'm sort of a normal person in between, and occasionally I turn up for a couple of weeks and appear in a big movie franchise. You were a working actor as well, and the theatre is very much part of what you do.
Yes. No, it's a massive thing.
Which do you prefer? Is it being filmed or a live audience?
No, I think there's something about being in front of an audience, which is, to me, is the kind of purest form of what I do. Because ultimately, and that's what we're doing here. And we're telling stories, right? We're having dialogue and exchange with the people who listen or watch.
Well, in many cases, you're telling the stories of some of the great storytellers.
Well, there's that privilege as well.
I'm just talking rubbish, but that's nothing to do.
With me bringing you down further, Mark,
because
so there's that.
Well, you say that you might be raising the bar, but you've played some of the great roles in Shakespeare as well, which I think you do have to be confident in your acting ability to take on those roles, like Romeo.
Or hopeful.
Well, there is that.
An endless optimist. Confidence is an interesting one. I mean, there is something about being on stage in front of an audience that I find it's an offering, You go and you make this offering and you hope that people come with you. And that's down to you, but it's also down to them. And that exchange, that dialogue is something that is made very plain when you're in the same space, doing it together. That's something you don't get when you shoot something. Because, people watch it however much months later or a year later or whatever, and have their own experience with your work, but you're not part of it, creating it in that moment with them. But in terms of confidence, I suppose maybe it's foolhardiness, but Tamara Harvey, who directs Pericles, which I'm doing at the moment, said something very good. She said, if they wanted it to be perfect, they'd stick something on Netflix. I mean, there's something about being in a space with actors telling the story that you're looking for something real and unmediated. And so I think with time, I feel less determined to get it right and more interested in, receiving something, being more open to the possibilities of that night and that audience, sharing something without that kind of judgment, which kind of slightly removes confidence from the thing
equation,
a little bit.
Yeah. Do I need to believe
some degree.
in myself, or
it sort of doesn't matter, right? It sort of doesn't matter. You're not there to go, was it good? Is it this? You're there to say the words, and someone said them before you, and someone will say them after you, and you have a short stay in these characters and these characters in you.
But do you have a real? Because I mean, you have done a lot of Shakespeare, and you've done Shakespeare at the great theatres, and you're at the Swan in Stratford upon Avon. And
it's amazing.
It's to perform Romeo at the Globe, for example. I mean, that kind of as a stage actor or someone who enjoys stage acting, that must kind of. Does it get better than that?
Hopefully, but again, that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm trying almost not just to keep going.
I suppose it's that thing of as everyone says, it's like what is the sort of pinnacle of living a proper life is to be in the moment.
That's it. That's what being on stage offers, enables, and requires. But on the point of doing the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet in the Globe, especially at the time that we did it, because it was just coming out of the pandemic. And so we had this kind of strange situation where people weren't, in the Globe, people stand in the middle of the space, and the stage is sort of one bit juts out into the space, and then you have people in these galleries that sort of curve around. It's a big wooden O. And we had people sitting at the beginning because they had to be socially distanced. And it was only about, the space maybe holds something like 1,500 people. It's really packed. But at the beginning, it was only sort of 500 or something. And it got fuller and fuller and fuller. And there was this feeling of life returning. Yeah. And so to get to tell that story in that way and feel the audience grow and their confidence in being in a communal space and them rediscovering doing something together with that many people.
That must feel very live.
It was especially after what we had come out of at that point. Absolutely it did. And also the Globe place where I first saw my father perform. He was in a production of Henry V in the opening season. So the Globe to me was always the kind of starting point. So to be back there with a play as extraordinary as Romeo and Juliet, and something that's amazing about the Globe, and I think Tamara's very interested in this, and we do it a bit. We do it in the Swan, but maybe is unusual to us in modern theatre, is that you speak to the audience. You're playing usually in the same lighting state, more or less. Sometimes it's just daytime. You can see them. It's not like they're in the dark over there. So if you're there, I can talk to you. I can really talk to you.
Make that connection.
And make that connection. And that's so much what Shakespeare offers us. And I think that's really essentially, however you go about it, what theatre is. It's about that connection between the people telling the story and the people making the story with them in the watching.
I mean, I think it's a very special thing to be able to do. I mean, I've done a little bit, not acting, but when when you stand up in front of a live audience, you either embrace that or you don't. And I think it's also knowing that actually when it goes a bit wrong, that's when it's fun. Rather than it's
totally.
Like, whoa, where did we go? How do we get back from that?
Totally. It's that thing of not trying to get it right, not
word
thinking
perfect.
It's not about the perfection of it. It's not about,
because they'd have to be a real Shakespearean act to go, hold on a sec, excuse me.
That's okay, isn't it? That's kind of exciting. I've had it a couple of times on Pericles. I've stepped out and I've fluffed my first line, and when I do it, I go, oh great, good.
You see,
good.
But a lot of people, that
You're knocked off course.
That would be the beginning of the end for them. But you're just there. So therefore, there must be an innate confidence or an innate belief in your ability that if that goes left, I can bring it back to centre regardless.
Do you know what it is? I think I hear what you're saying, and I think more than anything, it's an enjoyment rather than a confidence. It's a love of it. I really genuinely love doing it.
But do you think that's because you started doing it so young?
I'm sure that's part of it.
Yeah.
I'm
So
sure that's
it's
part of
much
it.
more part of you
Yes.
than it would be, say, for some people.
Yes, I think it's kind of a natural thing people have, isn't it? They look at their parents and say, I want to do what they do.
Yeah,
And
but
had
I
a
mean,
bit of that.
were you a show-off as a kid? You know,
Yes.
it's that kind of thing. I quite like the attention. I'd want it on me. That's
Yes,
So,
I did always have
so
that.
somebody went, we might need to find a healthy outlet first.
So you're being less disruptive in class. Yeah, I think that definitely is part of it. But I guess part of it starts with that fun. When you find something that you love, you should invest in that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You should give yourself to that and see where that leads you.
But I think it's that other thing of, you strike me as a man who's not afraid to fail.
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, thank you. That's that feels like a big compliment, but I am afraid to fail.
But
I
you
think
do it
everyone's
anyway.
you do it. I think that's everyone. No, who's not afraid to fail?
What would you view as? Because I mean, you know, you've had a pretty good career so far, but in there, is there anything? Because I think it was George Clooney who said, he goes, "I've learnt much more from my failures than my successes." What were the moments where you were like, "Oh dear God, how am I going to come back from this?" Or was there anything like that? Or key moments where it went wrong and you actually learnt something key about your craft from that?
Almost always when I watch myself and watch my work, this has changed over time, and I think that is one of those lessons. But I used to absolutely hate watching anything I did. So when I was out in America doing How to Get Away with Murder, we would film for 7 months of the year, and it would start going out as we were shooting.
Right.
Obviously, we'd be further down the line, be shooting whatever it is, episode 5, and they'd be airing episode 1. And so they'd air it for us at lunchtime before it went out. And so I'd watch it at lunch, and I'd barely be able to work the rest of the day. You know,
But that's quite painful to kind of see the character there and then go, and this afternoon you're going to be doing this.
Yeah.
But as him, and I've just watched him.
I've just watched him, and I'm awful. So how am I going to do an afternoon's work? So I started saying, well, I'm not going to watch it at lunch, so I'll watch it in the evening.
But
so I watched it in the evening, and then I was like, I better watch it at the weekend so I have more time to recover. And then I stopped watching it.
Yeah, but Shona Rhimes, who has kind of created a whole different approach to the sort of drama, and I think that's been enabled by streaming services and all that sort of stuff. Was that something that came from her, or in terms of that thing of was it very different working with her? Did she have different processes, or because she does create unique dramas that have a very different kind of lynch points and message?
Yeah, she was, you know, it was totally within that world. Our showrunner, the person who actually wrote the show, was Pete Nowalk. And Pete kind of had worked a lot with Shonda on other shows and sort of created it totally within that kind of field and aesthetic. But it was totally alien for me. Everything about it. I think I'd done about 13 days of TV before that. And all of a sudden I was on this massive show.
And it's quicker than
much quicker. And also, that's the other thing. I think it's funny because you do something like, you're part of something like Harry Potter and so many people have watched it. Or you do something like How to Get Away with Murder and so many people have watched it. And not as many people come to see Romeo and Juliet at the Globe just because those are the numbers, that's the nature of it. But I think stage is always kind of the place I feel most comfortable. But probably it looks like, oh, he's doing some theatre now. Whereas the way I perceive it is that I've always been doing plays, you know, and that's somewhere. So my process, my way of working was totally built around working on stage. And so I had no sense of doing the work in that kind of time. And I was trying to do things I would do before a rehearsal process and during a 4 or 6 week rehearsal process, when we'd get scripts sometimes 2 days before we're shooting a scene. Right. And you're working a 14-hour day in between. You know, it required a total kind of revolution in the way I approached my work, or at least a condensation of focus.
Because obviously you work with Viola Davis on that as well. What was that like? I mean, you know, she's such a kind of force.
She is an extraordinary actor, and just a joyous and lovely person. She has this amazing kind of, as you say, a force, a weight, a gravitas. But she has a lightness to her as a person that maybe people don't anticipate. And she, you know, she'd done a lot of theatre. She was a real. She's interested in the playing of it. She understands that side of it, and we had a real company on that job. Brilliant actors who worked together with this material that was so challenging, because it was so extreme. So much was going on, and one week this is happening, and next week they've made up, and then you know, it has that kind of crazy soapy nature. And you had a lot of committed actors going, okay, well, how do I square that circle? How do I make it work? But I think that kind of rigor was a big part of it.
Well, I suppose for something like that, you've got to, rather than within the script itself, you've got to really develop the character first and foremost in your head, haven't you? So that you can then move freely between the ever-changing dialogue and
Yes. You have to be really plastic.
Yeah.
You know, you have to find ways of making these kind of radical turns and going with it. I think this was something I thought of actually on the Couple Next Door, which was a show I did. I think we shot it last year. Maybe it came on towards the end of last year on Channel 4. Did you enjoy it?
I thought it was great.
It was a real treat to do.
Highly creepy Hugh Dennis. I mean, it was like, hold on a second.
Dennis,
It's the nice man off Mock the Week, and he's doing strange things in his bedroom on his own.
This feels very wrong. Good, yeah, that was a kind of genius piece of casting, and he was brilliant. But I had this thought on that job, which was something that I'd kind of learnt from How to Get Away with Murder, which certainly the times that I watched it certainly felt like a failure to me. Which was
turns out really successful, but you know, if he sees it as failure, we'll go with it.
But it's that thing of don't fight what it is. You know, put yourself in service of what it is. It has that soapiness to it, or it has that pulpiness to it. Embrace that. Yeah. See where you can go with that. Don't be in opposition to it just because you're trying to be more truthful.
Well, because your character in, you know, The Couple Next Door starts off what could only be described as a little bit of a melt, doesn't it?
That's good, I like that.
You know, and then sort of develops, you know, he's sort of like, I'm not going to get left behind here with all of this, and, you know, the big alpha guy across the road, I'm going to have to take him on at some point, and, you know. But, I mean, it was deliberately sexy as a drama.
Yes.
I mean, you know, you have to look at the cast and go, all right, well, Hugh Dennis is holding up the end of the less attractive amongst us in this lot. Yeah.
But I was part of that axis too. It was me and you. That was one of the things that was quite nice. It was so much sexiness, but it felt like the rest of them were the sexy, and I was the square, which was quite fun.
You grew.
I grew. I developed.
You grew into
I grew into my sexy.
But I mean, to sort of work like that, and I suppose it's that thing of you would read the script on something like that and go, oh, this requires again something else of me that I've not done necessarily a vast amount of.
Yes.
Was that why you chose it? Because it would show you again in a different light?
No, it wasn't that conscious. I think.
Because there's a lot of, for those who haven't seen it, there's a lot of kit-off action.
Yeah. There was a fair bit of that in what was it? How to Get Away with Murder.
But I mean, the main focus is of The Couple Next Door.
What lies beneath
is let's all get our kit off. We've got this really attractive couple who've moved in across the road. And can the pervy bloke with his telescope watch us do it?
Yeah, perfect.
I mean, there's obviously a bit more depth to it.
Not much. Let's not overcomplicate it. Yeah, I mean, truly, when I got it, I thought I just couldn't see myself doing it. I thought, how am I going to do this?
Well, look, we've got to that point in proceedings.
Oh, this is exciting.
Where I'm going to hand you your luxury Smug blindfold.
Thank you very
much. Our lovely
much.
friends at Smug give us those.
Thank you,
I'm
Smug.
just going to give the table a bit of a clear up.
Okay.
Because we need a bit of space to this. Don't go blind yet.
Oh, no,
well,
too
stay
soon.
blind. Stay blind.
Stay blind.
I like you like that. Slightly vulnerable and ready for me.
There we go.
I'm just
in expectation.
I'm going to move your toast because you didn't seem that interested in that.
Yeah, the toast, I've never been so big on the toast in the fryer.
Well, I like fried bread, though.
Fried bread is nice. I like that.
Oh.
There are a few things I don't like, really. I like toast in itself, but it's just there are so many exciting things on the plate.
Which it's it's about the meat, isn't it?
It is
and
about
whatever
the meat.
whatever channels in the
pudding.
meat. Right. So we're coming to our first spoon here.
I'm worried I'm not going to locate the spoon.
No, don't worry. I will feed you.
Oh,
Yes,
well,
no,
I really
no,
am
no.
vulnerable.
No, it's full vulnerability here on Spooning with Mark
Okay,
Wogan.
great.
So we've got our first spoon here,
Ah.
and what I want you to do, you're gonna.
How big is this spoon?
Well,
Am I
you're going to have to open
my
quite
mouth?
wide.
Right, okay.
All right,
great.
you ready? Here it comes.
Okay.
There we go. Tell us what the flavours, what the textures are, what you're getting. What have we got? Give us some words.
So,
here.
yeah.
There's a lot of chewing and a lot of
There's a lot of
but
enjoyment.
some level of description would be
There's,
nice.
there's a sort of, maybe like a blended battery, crispy, crunchy
Yes.
outside,
Yes.
soft inside, a little bit of maybe some kind of seafood filling on the
Oh, I
inside.
don't know about seafood. Take the
it's not,
blindfold
am I
off.
wrong?
Take the blindfold off. It's one of your favourite childhood things.
It's an acarajé. I thought it was. It's not as palm oily as they sometimes go.
But this was the interesting thing, is that you sort of talked a lot about your love of palm oil, which most people will go, oh, palm oil, it's terrible, it's in everything, it's going to be the demise of the
world.
NHS because, people get obese eating palm oil. But, or something like that. But used in the right way, it gives a different flavour.
It's so good.
And the palm oil that you're talking about is a far less processed thing than the stuff that ends up in all the different foods that bulk it out or create a flavour or a texture,
Right, okay.
or give it a fat thing in a cheap way. That palm oil that you've had in Brazil that actually adds flavour is almost like a sort of cold pressing of an olive oil.
Okay.
Because you get really good olive oil, and then you get rubbish sort of blended stuff down here that just tastes like grease, and not the country. But
They have good olive oil there.
they have good olive oil there.
How to Get Away with Murder is so popular in Brazil that it's led to me
think
working
that's
out
because of having a much more multicultural cast in it, and that sort of linchpin point that Shonda Rhimes made important in all of her
I think that's a big
productions.
part of it. Certainly around the world. So, I'm shooting something in South Africa. It was massive there. I haven't been to a country in the world where people haven't seen How to Get Away with Murder. And I to that point,
Shall we go and try and find one? Is that what you're looking for?
seek out a place.
Looking for?
I went to Latvia, and I thought no one will have seen it here. Not least because most of my experience has said that the show seems to be more popular where you have more of a black population, because there is that visibility thing. There's that thing of seeing yourself represented. And I don't know what the black population of Latvia is, but I
I
imagine.
want to imagine it's massively high.
Well, there is actually. I have. He's not quite Latvian yet, but a friend in Latvia who's a Brazilian footballer who went there, learnt Latvian, and now is a musician who he's like a Latvian hip hop artist.
Wow.
And he raps in Latvian. So again, confluence and people coming together in different cultures, but extraordinarily, people have seen it in Latvia. People seem to have seen this show everywhere, but in Brazil, there's a slightly different thing because it's an English show, and social inequality there is quite pronounced on racial lines. It tends to be more watched by the kind of bourgeoisie, people who consume kind of English language content.
Yeah.
So that's a slight nuance, which was something that isn't necessarily reflected everywhere else. But it does mean that people know who I am in Brazil, and then people discover that I'm Brazilian as well, and now I've worked in Brazil, and that was a real gift.
But given the enormous success of Shonda Rhimes' approach to how she puts her productions together and what is important that they represent, and she likes to kind of reuse people. Were you disappointed not to get a role in Bridgerton?
I was all right.
I mean, I kind of you got a sort of air of the Duke about you. I think you could have pulled that off really easily.
It's that sexy thing. I don't quite. I wish everyone thought like you, Mark.
If only that, you know, just if the couple next door had come out before that,
then we could have changed it all.
You would have been a shoo-in for the Rennet part, wouldn't you?
It would have been all different.
You know, because I think you could hold your own against him, couldn't you? Equally tall, good-looking men.
Yes, two tall, good-looking men. You don't have too much of a good thing, though, Mark.
Well, it appears in Bridgerton you can't get enough of the good thing.
Well, I think that is.
They're all having the good thing all the time.
That is a big feature of Shondaland. There's a excess of goodness.
But she does like sexy in her production.
Yeah.
She will push sexy, but and sometimes it's done in a very humorous way as well. And but it does kind of. There's a bit of focus on people's peccadillos and that kind of stuff, and you know she's not afraid to kind of hit certain things head on, which I really like about her productions.
Yes.
Would you love to work with her again?
It was I mean, How to Get Away with Murder was the most kind of amazing experience. But I mean, she calls me up.
Yeah.
Says, "Come do this. Come do that.
Yeah.
Something fun." You know.
I need sexy.
I need sexy. That would be my. That's my. I think the sexy is.
I don't want sexy. I need sexy.
Well,
I'm sorry, I'm not available for sexy. I'm available for intelligent, thoughtful, and slightly.
And blank verse. Maybe she'll call me for a verse show that she's doing.
Right, it's time for your final spoon.
Amazing, very exciting.
So if you pop the
blindfold back on.
Blindfold back on.
Here we go.
We're going to bring in the final plate.
Oof! What treats!
Okay, so here we have your final spoon. Oh, I need you to.
I've gone early, haven't I?
Open wide. Yeah. Open
I was
wide.
there with my mouth
Here we
open
go.
in
Here we go.
expectation.
Open wide. There we go. Now, tell me textures, flavours, what you're getting,
Creamy,
what you're enjoying.
Moussey, bit of tartness, bit of a citric acidity, very nice.
Any other flavour in there? You're getting another one? It's a little, maybe a subtle back note of something?
God, I'm awful. I can't identify anything clearly.
Well, it is interesting when you know, as you said many times on this podcast, when you remove sight, you remove so much preconception or kind of triggering of stuff.
Oh.
Oh, he's got it. It's landed.
There it is. It's just got it just at the end. Yeah, a little bit of licoricey, aniseedy goodness.
Take the blindfold off.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
It's such a distinctive flavour. It's funny, but it was very lightly done.
Because in many ways, you're a great guest from this perspective, but also a challenging one because you basically went, I pretty much like everything and I'll eat anything. And, you know, so it's quite hard to think, all right, well, what are we going to do to change perceptions and make him enjoy stuff? And it's like, you know, I don't like that, but if you force me, I'll eat it. Was sort of you. And, you know, I'm very similar. It's like I don't have anything that I won't eat.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, there's things that's like, don't put too much dill on something. I don't want that.
Too much of anything.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Chocolate. But then
would that be its own meal?
Yeah. You know, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been a real joy.
You know,
thank you for having me.
You are a lovely man and a talented actor as well.
Thank you.
Sometimes they don't always go hand in glove. But that is all we have time for this week on Spooning. As we mentioned before, you can catch Alfie at the Swan Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon doing Pericles until the 21st of September. I would just like to, as always, say thank you to the team here at the Mount Street Restaurant for creating some fantastic food. I think Alfie's favourite was probably the English breakfast, along with a pint, which I'd just like to point out he just finished. Now, we are going to be doing this live at St Albans Pub in the Park. Is the 6th to the 8th of September. And I will be interviewing, which could be challenging, none other than Lee Francis, a.k.a. Keith Lemon. But until then, you can watch us on YouTube. You can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. And of course, obviously, if you're doing that, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe and give us 5 stars. But until then, stay beautiful.